Hello, everybody. Hope you're doing all right. Um, First off, so sorry about the delay in the video this week. I had some pretty serious technical difficulties with my computer when I got back. I'm a married man now, so that's awesome. But when we got back from the trip, I turned on my computer in like a week, and I guess that was long enough for something to happen to it. So, anyways, I've been getting that figured out the last couple days, but. Nonetheless, I've got the video ready now, and the email will go out shortly. But this week we're on Unit 34, Session 3. So Unit 34, Session 3, and we got an awesome passage this week. It's Ephesians 2, verses 1. I think it goes 1 through 10, and then 14 through 16. But basically, just from the beginning of the chapter all the way to verse 16 is kind of what we're covering. And I mean, I'm telling you, this is one of the passages you preach if you're preaching like a very evangelistic sermon. Or it doesn't have to be that. It's a great passage for believers to hear too, because what it does is it reminds us of who we were before Christ and what he did. And if we're not daily reminding ourselves of the gospel, then we will forget the gospel. The gospel will get watered down. One of the best advice I was ever given in just regards to like how to maintain that sense of joy in your walk with Christ is daily teach yourself the gospel and remind yourself that you were once dead and now you're alive. So just want to kind of have three considerations for us as we think about this passage and just take these for what they are. They're suggestions, not an outline for anything by any means, but just for some things to think about as you're teaching. When I read this passage, one of the first things that comes to my mind is I'm reminded to consider what my pre-saved condition was. And when we think about that, our pre-saved condition, who we were before Christ, was dead. Like we were dead. Not physically. However, spiritually we were dead. And one day physically we would die and never have any chance to be raised again with Christ. When we remind ourselves of where we were before Christ, it makes the gift of salvation an actual gift, right? So you can have the greatest news in the world, but if you don't need that great news, it doesn't mean anything to you. It's like giving $1 million to a billionaire. Like, what's $1 million more going to do for a billionaire? You know, it's like, oh, that's a drop in the bucket. You know, but if you're poor and you have nothing and you're low income and someone gives you $1 million, that changes your life. You know, and so just think about that. Such a shallow comparison to what the gospel is for us. It's so much more than we could ever equate on any kind of monetary level. But it's going from death to life, right? And so remind ourselves of our pre-saved condition, which we were dead. Second thing, now consider your present position. Paul, when he's writing this passage, I think he gets pretty hype because when he writes it, he's in verse 4. We have this great shift. We see these two words says, "but God," and that changes the entire tone of the passage because it goes from this dreadful news of, hey, you were dead in your trespasses and your sins, and it transitions into how we've now been made alive. And when you think about that, he doesn't just say that we've been made alive, but we have been raised up with Christ and are seated with him at the right hand of God the Father with Jesus. And so, like, Christ has not only given us life, but he's given us a seat at the table with him. So going from completely undeserving or completely awful and dead and hopeless to the point where we could not hope for anything greater. Right? It's taken us from our deepest sorrow to our greatest possible joy. And that's the gospel. That's why it's so amazing. And then last thing, and he kind of talks about this, Paul talks about this in verses 14 through 16, but he says to consider the peace that you now live in, you know? Consider the peace that you now live in, not only the peace that you have with God, like, because before you knew Jesus, there was no peace between you and God. There was a wall of hostility. Right? Paul talks about this of where now there's no laws that are holding us down. There's no commands Um, we can break those commands, and His grace for us is still sufficient. Doesn't mean we should want to break those commands, but we're no longer judged for our own righteousness. We're judged on when God looks at us, He sees the righteousness of Jesus. And so think about the peace we now live in and the peace we can now promote to other people, right? In the Beatitudes, it says, blessed are the peacemakers. And that's not just talking about, being peaceful and being calm, but it's about sharing this good news that can bring peace between God and man. Being a peacemaker, meaning giving that good news to someone so that there can then be peace between God and man. And so, anyways, it's a great passage. I could talk about it for an hour, but I won't. And so I'm going to let you guys go. But thank you guys for teaching. We'll see you Sunday.